later. So no, I don't want Edge to be my default browser. All right, so as you can see, if we scroll up here to the top, this is from the University of Microfilms International. I bought this online for about 40 bucks. You can search this document if you want to find it and download it yourself. You can see this was released in 1980. He was working on it through the 70s. And it's essentially a really in-depth, detailed view of his scientific research. So you can see here, Doctor of Philosophy in Psychophysiology. So the reason why he's a doctor in philosophy in psychophysiology is because there really was no program at the time for lucid dreaming. There aren't really many programs for it now either, but it's more accepted as a psychological phenomenon. At this time, most of the people that were researching it were considered pseudoscientists, pseudoscientific people, like people that were interested in psychic phenomena. And, you know, I could mention names, but you probably won't recognize them. But like a lot of the early lucid dreaming researchers and authors were more on the spiritual side of things. And there's still kind of this conflict in lucid dreaming, in the lucid dreaming world, between the spiritual and the physical. Sorry, the spiritual and the psychological. You could call it physical, but so all that being said, he worked with his advisors to develop his own doctoral program, and figured that out using the psychophysiology path. Okay, so acknowledgements, blah, 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 table of contents. I think the thing that most interests me about this document is, well, there's a couple different things, but his history of lucid dreaming is really great. He describes where he got his information, where he got his ideas, you know, what the foundation for his research. Without previous research, his research would not have been possible, you know, as science goes. So the studies that he did, and he's famous for verifying lucid dreaming scientifically and verifying that it is a real thing that people experience. And so he actually goes into how he did that, and he shows the evidence. He actually has images of what's called a hypnograph. All right, hypnogram. Anyway, it's there's a thing called an electroencephalogram. I think it's pronounced EEG, and it measures brain activity. And so you can actually tell what kind of dream state or what kind of sleep stage, they call them sleep stages, what sleep stage a person is in using an EEG. So I think that's probably the most interesting part of it. You know, you can see here the EEG during REM lucid dreams, page 95. So let's just go to that one real quick, because I think that's probably one of the most interesting ones. So here we are, the EEG during REM lucid dreams. This is where EEG activity during the still verified lucid dreams. It's basically, they bring somebody into a lab and they have them go to sleep, and then they monitor them using an EEG. They monitor their brain. So as they're sleeping through the night, your brain does, you know, there's different voltage levels. You're going into different stages. As you know, N1 is stage 1 sleep. That's you're going into sleep, you're falling asleep. Stage 2 is, I believe that is kind of it's not the deepest sleep. I forget if it's like theta or delta waves. And then there's N3, which I believe is deep sleep. I don't remember all this stuff. Just look up sleep stages. EEG is electroencephalogram. So if we just look up EEG here, electroencephalogram, and it measures the electrical activity in your brain. So your brain is constantly firing off electricity. It's just constantly, these neurons are constantly firing electricity and communicating with each other. And so you, with this device, it can actually measure the electricity moving around in the brain. And then we can, this is used. This is like probably the most common way that brain and sleep research happens. So when somebody goes into a sleep lab, they'll put on one of these EEG things. I don't know why there's so many. Like, that's a ridiculous amount of it's like her entire head is covered in it. That's interesting. So it's like, maybe this is like a newer setup or something. But yeah, so they measure the brain activity, and then they can tell, like, almost all our dreams happen during REM sleep. And so they can actually tell when you're going into REM. There's brain activity involved. There's also eye movements involved. And so this was actually first established in the 1950s. And so that's kind of what I think is so cool about what I think is so cool about the dissertation is because he goes into like the foundation for his research. So, well, somebody had to figure out how to, somebody had to build the EEG, somebody had to figure out how to use it. Like, all these different things had to come together to be able to do this research. And, I think it was Isaac Newton who said that he was standing on the giants before him. And it's kind of funny thinking about somebody like that saying that, because Isaac Newton basically just made up calculus. He just, figured it out, which is insane. But, without previous mathematics, he probably wouldn't have been able to do that. Who knows? But I'm sure there were other people that were super smart before Isaac Newton and they didn't figure out calculus, right? So you kind of, it's interesting how that works. But let me see if I can find the okay, so that's wrist movements. Let's see, are we going to get into, I think, what does this say? Head movement. So let me just signal. This is probably going to be a lot of signals. Oh, it's just, yeah, there's 44. Okay. It should take us. This is another interesting graph, actually. This is a this is a graph that Laberge made of his lucid dreaming efforts. So he kind of categorized, he was very scientific about it. He categorized all of his dreams, like actually know somebody who does something similar where they've created this giant Excel document and they've created all these criteria, and then every single lucid dream they have, they record every piece of information in their criteria. And it's really cool. You can get some really interesting insights from that. Yeah, rapid eye movement. So that's REM. And essentially what that looks like is your eyes are moving back and forth very quickly. And that happens every time you're in REM sleep. And so what Laberge devised was an experiment where a person would get lucid and then move their eyes back and forth intentionally. So sorry for the scrolling here, but I'm trying to find the visual where he, let me just go back to the table of contents. It's easier to find that way. So he actually has an image here. Okay, phenomenology, lucid dream, introduction to research, historical, so blah, 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 lucid dreaming verified by that. Okay, so page 80. So yeah, I was like right here already. Joseph says, what technique do you use? What technique do you do? You know, when people ask me that, I honestly, I don't really have a good answer because I use all the techniques. Like I will literally use anything and everything. But what I've done is I've researched a lot over the years, and I got really into Tibetan stuff. So a lot of the Western interest in lucid dreams originated with the Tibetan teachings coming to the West, and just Buddhist teachings in general coming to the West. So in the early 1800s, and then again in the mid 1900s, there were really I don't know if I'm going to find it right now, so sorry about that. There were, I know it's in the Exploring the World Lucid Dreaming PDF, but Buddhism came over to the West. There was a lot of interest in that, kind of sparked a lot of spiritual interest that kind of coincided with the cultural, the 60s revolution, cultural revolution in the US. And so I got all my, not all my, but I devised a system for myself using a lot of attributes of Tibetan dream yoga. And basically the main, if I was to break it down, I think of it like, okay, there's stuff you can do during the day. There's stuff you can do right before you fall asleep. There's stuff you can do at night, and there's stuff you can do right when you wake up. So there's 4 time frames, right? Daytime, pre-sleep, nighttime, awakening. So daytime, going to sleep, pre-sleep, right? So then nighttime, then waking up. Those are 4 different time stages. And then you just fill in, you fill that in with exercises. Oh, that was weird. That's weird sounds outside. Some kind of moving truck, I guess. Oh, okay. Anyway, so is this copyrighted? Yes. But it's really old. Like, we're good. So I guess that doesn't really answer the technique. Like, what technique do I do? You know, it's, if I was to go into it, it'd just be like even more long-winded than I already was. If you have any specific questions, maybe follow up, and just like, you have any questions about what I just said, you know, like, I mean, yeah, I do mild, I do wild, I do reality checks and all that. Malice Gaming, I was wondering if anyone you know has experienced troubles with streaming after continually setting alarms like at the same time each night. Is there any chance my sleep schedule will adjust? Would your and like your REM would adjust to not occur on this wake up time? Yeah, the PDF is available through this publishing company, University Microfilms International. if you just Google search lucid dreaming and exploratory study of consciousness during sleep, if you Google this with Stephen Laberge's name, you should be able to find it. And it's about like $40. So continually setting alarms to wake up at the same time each night. Is there any chance my sleep schedule would adjust? Your REM would adjust to not occur around this wake up time. So if you're going to, so REM operates on a cycle through the night, and you go through these sleep stages, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you cycle through these stages over and over throughout the night. And initially, you will have a period of deep sleep, and this is like a very regenerative stage. And I'm going to pull up an image of a hypnogram to show you. Okay. So this is a hypnogram, and I like this one because it shows how complex sleep really is. Sleep, it's not simple, and everybody is different. Every night is different, but it does fall within some general rules. So each one of these symbols right here mean a different thing. Waking, what's R? What was R again? R is REM sleep, and M is movement time. So M is movement, W is waking, R is REM. So you're awake, you drop down into 1, then you drop down into 2, then you drop down into 3, then you drop down into 4. This person, and you see the time here, right? So that's been about an hour, right? And then after about an hour, they come back up into stage 2. Then they go into REM. They go into REM between an hour and a half and 2 hours in. That's about right. So your first REM period should start usually around 90 minutes in. Then that lasts maybe 5 to 15 minutes, if that. It's your shortest. Your first REM cycle is your shortest. They drop back down into 2, 3, 4, right? And they come back up into 2, back up into REM. Okay, so this is their second REM cycle. That's about 2.25 hours in. 2.5, 2.25. And that lasts a little bit longer, right? Back down to 2. And you can see there's less stage 4, right? Your stage 4 usually happens earlier in the night. You're coming back up to 2, back up to REM. This time it's even longer. Now there's a time where they go back down into 2, back up into REM. And they wake up. Have a period of awakening. Okay, after they wake up, you can think of this maybe as a wake back to bed. They go back to sleep, back down into 2. Back up into REM. And this time, this REM period is like, it is lengthy. That looks like a full hour. Now, there are some splits and, and so when you think about this in terms of dreams, a lot of times people will, come out of a dream and then go back into the same dream without even realizing it. And it'll feel and seem like the same dream. There's always these little caveats, right? There's always these little technically speaking, there's always these kind of things that make a difference, that it's always different every night, and they change those little things that make a difference. They change the way you're experiencing things. So there's no real clear rules. Explains why dreams are all over the place. Yeah, sleep is not really a simple thing, and dreams are not. So when you're talking about, Malice Gaming is talking about adjusting the sleep cycle using alarms. Oh my God, that's loud. Hopefully y'all can't hear that too much. So when you're talking about adjusting your sleep cycle, you have to maintain really strict consistency if you want to manipulate your sleep cycle properly. So there is a technique called sleep cycle adjustment. And it was originally developed by Daniel Love. And he's been around the community for quite a while, and he's got a YouTube channel called, he changed it, the Lucid Portal. It was the Lucid Guide. Now I think it's the Lucid Portal. I think a lot of it's paywalled, but I forget exactly how, but he does have a website. It's a good website. So cycle adjustment technique, CAT, you need a really consistent sleep schedule for a while before adjusting your cycle or manipulating your sleep in order to have an effect. And kind of with all scientific things, you want to have everything controlled and then change one factor in order to have the clearest possible data. So if you're trying to manipulate your sleep, then you need to start with a really consistent base. Then if you're setting an alarm to wake up at the same time each night, I think I would need a little bit more context there, Malice Gaming, to kind of really understand what you're going after. Whether you're doing a wake back to bed, whether you're trying mild or wild, or dealed, or whatever technique you're using. And then if you're trying to wake up during REM or trying to wake up in between REM cycles, typically we wake up between REM cycles. And so what we call natural awakenings is you're not going to be going back into REM, right? So when you have a natural awakening after a REM cycle, you can see on the hypnogram here, and I'm just going to blow it up. You can see on the hypnogram that there's these little awakenings, and these are the natural awakenings that we usually have. They're very short. And when we go back to sleep, they happen after a REM cycle. When we go back to sleep, we don't go back into REM. We go back into a deep sleep. We go back into a stage 2, right? So when people talk about doing wild after waking up from a REM cycle, this is probably why people have such a hard time with wild, because they're not falling back asleep into REM. They're falling asleep back into deep dreaming. So it's almost like you're almost guaranteeing that you're not going to get a lucid if you're trying that, unless you have a lot of experience. So for me, if I do that, I can do that and go to sleep, but it's not like full consciousness all the way through. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go back to sleep, and I know I'm going to go into a dream, and then I get lucid when that dream starts. But I don't know when the dream started. Was I lucid dreaming in a stage 2? Was I in REM? I don't know. I don't really care. Oh, thanks, Fenrix. Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate that. Yeah, I used to have my face on here, but I'm a super important person in real life now, so I'm trying to hide my face a little bit. Okay, so I was wondering more, if you try to do wild or mild or wake back, but at the same time every night, will your REM sleep stages adjust to stop happening around that time? Oh. So instead of waking up during a dream, your REM stops, giving your dreams around that time at your alarm has been set for consistency. I see. Okay, so first of all, if you're setting an alarm to interrupt REM sleep, it's not exactly healthy to interrupt REM sleep. That's first thing. REM interruption is that happens with certain sleep disorders like sleep apnea. And in those cases, our brain really needs REM. Like, there's a book called Why We Sleep, and he goes into detail on, the different indicators that show how important REM is to the brain. And it actually seems that the brain prefers to have REM sleep over deep sleep. It was previously assumed that sleep, it was like, okay, why do we sleep? Well, it must be for the deep sleep, regenerative, restorative. It's repairing everything and we're resting. But it's actually REM seems to be the top priority for the brain. And we don't really know why we have REM sleep. We don't really know what's the purpose behind REM sleep. We don't really know the purpose, and we have some ideas behind why we dream. But we don't really know exactly why REM sleep is so important. So I would say if you're using an alarm to interrupt REM, you do one of two things. One, don't do it very often. Or two, there's three things. One, don't do it very often. Two, make it short, like a 1 minute awakening. Or three, time your awakenings to happen during gaps between REM sleep, so that you're more likely to go back to sleep straight into REM. I have another study that I don't remember the name of off the top of my head, and I wouldn't be able to pull it up immediately, that has a hypnogram of somebody who is intentionally trying to lucid dream with wake back to beds. And it's not a guarantee that you're going to go back into REM if you wake up, even if you time it right. This person timed it. He's in a sleep lab. They were helping him out, monitoring his brain, and they were trying to time it perfectly. Even if you try to time it perfectly, doesn't mean you're going to go straight into REM. There is no guarantee that any technique is going to work. Not just because, I might not be good at it yet. It's also even for somebody who's advanced, simply because of how chaotic the dream and sleep, activity can be. Like, this is, if you look at this and you don't know what you're looking at, it looks like total chaos. If you start thinking about it, you start breaking it down, okay, there is some patterns here, there's some order, right? But, when you're talking about trying to get a lucid dream consistently, predictably, there's so much happening that you kind of have to go with the flow. And you kind of just have to assume that it's not going to behave according to your expectations. It's kind of like RNG, but for brains. Yeah, it behaves according to specific rules, and then there's wiggle room within those rules, right? Like REM period happens usually every 90 minutes. Your brain is going to go into deep sleep first when you first fall asleep. Now here's a thing. I've experienced something where I fell asleep and I went straight into a lucid dream. Okay. I was in the dream for a bit. I wake up, I look at my phone. It's only been 15 minutes since I last looked at my phone. So not only was there time of me laying in bed, falling asleep, there was also time of me in the lucid dream, which was probably a few minutes maybe. And then I'm waking up, right? And it was only 15 minutes. Was I in REM? Or was I lucid dreaming in a deeper sleep stage, like 2, 3, 4? It would probably be 2, stage 2, right? I don't know. I intentionally woke up from that lucid dream because I didn't want to forget it. And I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense. I just fell asleep. Why am I in a lucid dream? I need to wake up and check what time it is just to make sure. So I forced myself to wake up, right? But if I didn't force myself to wake up, what would have happened? Would I have gone into deep sleep? And this is the part where it's like, man, I kind of want to buy an EEG thing and hook it up to my brain, like just to kind of match what's happening to my experiences, you know? They're really expensive though. Like a proper EEG helmet is pretty expensive. Is REM and lucid dreaming separate or conjoined? They are conjoined and separate. So this is the thing about lucid dreaming is there are rules, but every single rule can be broken. And in order to get to the highest levels of lucid dreaming, you have to break all the rules. You have to. And this is true in a lot of things, actually. You know, athletes, there's certain professional athletes that, like, I know there's this basketball player that does really weird free throws. And it's like, that is terrible form, but it works, right? So he's breaking the rules, but it works for him. So, but it's like, you only can really get there through a lot of practice. So the people that are breaking the rules and making it work, those are the people that have a lot of experience. So breaking the rules is not recommended, at least at first. When you're learning, you know, you follow the rules in order to learn. Then once you've learned, you can start figuring out, okay, where can I, because you have to break the rules in order to grow. You have to break them in order to really figure out your full potential. Let's see. Yeah, I've got some really interesting studies. I don't remember. Excuse me. I don't remember. By the way, I've purchased these. So these are available online without purchase. You just have to use some workarounds, and I'll leave it up to you to figure out how to do that. But for me, I like to purchase certain studies that I find especially interesting. This is one that I like to share a lot. I think I'll probably go for another 15 minutes and then jump off. This one's super interesting because it compares the popular methods, the popular techniques. So it's showing like all these studies throughout the years, which techniques they used and the results. And then there's a chart further down where they rank them. They kind of use a data chart here, a ranking chart, and then they've got another chart, here we go, where they take all the studies together and then they give it an effectiveness level. So green being the best, yellow being mid-range, and red being the worst. As someone who's had a lot of trouble lucid dreaming techniques, what technique would you recommend I try? Yeah, so I mean, this good segue there, because according to the research, these techniques in green are the most effective. So you can see wild is yellow. It's just less successful, right? It's just less successful than other techniques for beginners. Just overall, it's less successful. Your most successful techniques are going to be mild, mnemonic. This is mnemonic induction of lucid dreaming, reality tests, building intention. So essentially, you know, the oldies but goodies, like Stephen Laberge's mild technique and Paul Tholey's combined technique. Those are going to be the two most effective techniques for beginners. Light stimulus is marked as green here. However, that seems to be subjective. I've heard a lot of negative things about masks, and the masks use the light stimulus. It'll look at your eyes and tell when you're in REM sleep and then flash some lights. It's really hit or miss with the light stimulus. Maybe in the lab, they're more effective. And, on a more cynical note, Stephen Laberge produced his own light stimulus mask. And so he also had an incentive to make it work. So all these studies with the light stimulus are from Laberge. And, I think he eventually abandoned that mask because it just didn't really, it didn't take off, and it didn't really work as well as expected, honestly. So in terms of, having trouble with lucid dreaming, I would recommend, okay, so here's the thing, Malice Game. You're not going to hear this from anybody else in the lucid dreaming world. I think there are two approaches to lucid dreaming. One is, okay, I want to lucid dream a lot. I want to lucid dream all the time. Super interested in this. The other approach is, I just want to experience this. I don't care if I have a bunch of lucid dreams. I just want to have one. Okay. So if you just want to have one lucid dream, the best way to go about it is by physiological manipulation. Okay. Which means manipulating your brain, manipulating your body and your brain in order to trigger a lucid dream. The best way to do that is through sleep deprivation and wake back to bed. Okay. So the problem with that is that it's kind of it's time consuming, and it kind of screws up your sleep schedule. So it's better to do that when you can sleep in the next day. So then, you would sleep for, and depending on the person, you could sleep from 4 to 6 hours and then wake up. If you sleep 6 hours and you can't get back to sleep for 4 hours, right? So that would be, there's also a sleep deprivation exercise, which is less recommended, which is that you just don't sleep for a night. You just pull an all-nighter. And then the next night, you use multiple alarms during the night to wake yourself up. And you wake yourself up a couple times, and your brain is going to be so desperate for REM that it's going to push it. It's going to push for REM so hard that it's going to, right. So there is a little bit of health risk there in terms of, sleep deprivation has, raises your heart rate, raises your blood pressure, increases your stress level, decreases your reaction times. So if you do any of this stuff, it's usually better to do on a weekend. But this is where you're using extreme physical manipulation to trigger a lucid dream. On the other hand, if you're using you want long-term success, you can use stuff like mild reality checks, wake back to beds, using your wake back to bed in a way that's, maybe a short one, or you're changing your sleep cycle to where you're going to bed a half an hour earlier than you usually do, so that you can stay up for a half an hour a night, right? That's the sort of long-term stuff. And those things, you just need to be consistent. You just got to be consistent. And it may take a month. It may take 3 months. But if you stay consistent with something on a daily basis for 3 months, I would say if you didn't have a lucid dream after 3 months of trying every day and doing the techniques properly, I would say it's probably time to either switch techniques or consider, maybe lucid dreaming isn't your thing. So, but I want to be careful with that one, because a lot of times people think they're doing the right thing, but they're not. So before quitting, I would definitely put a lot of effort into making sure that you're doing the techniques the right way, because a lot of times what you'll do in the beginning is just going through the motions. You know, in mild, there's the auto-suggestion thing where you're saying, I will lucid dream. Are you just saying the words? Because just saying the words isn't going to do jack. Like, there has to be a function that's happening. You know, somebody's depending on you for something, and you tell them, don't worry, I got you. I'm going to do this thing for you. Okay? You might not be conscious of what you're doing in that moment when you tell that person, but you're setting an intention, and there's emotional weight behind it because you care about this person. You want to do what's right, or you want to take care of them, or you want to help them some way. Like, there's a lot of other factors that are really pushing hard to make sure you remember that. Whereas in lucid dreaming, if you're unable to produce that through willpower, just like straight up forcing yourself to do it, basically like willing yourself to do it, you need other ways of like you got to be able to get into a certain mindset when you're doing these techniques. And a lot of times what I suggest is people get a narrative to follow. So somebody I knew that was extremely successful at lucid dreaming used the Last Airbender TV show as a narrative to kind of almost like a seed for their intention. Like, because I think intention it's really difficult to describe because there's no set way of being able to, be aware of how it works, or like it's so personal. Everybody kind of figures that out their own way. And, in terms of intention, you can do perspective memory exercises. Laberge talks about that. Laberge pretty much has everything in his book, Exploring the World of Lucid Dreams. And mild is, his technique is not just, wake up during the night, remember your dream, tell yourself you're going to lucid dream, imagine your dream sign, all that stuff. It's also daytime exercises, reality checks, perspective memory exercises. It's a whole body of exercises that come together to support the technique. So that's probably why it's the most successful. And it's also probably why so many people fail at it, because most people are probably not following the entire technique to the letter. Like, if you're actually doing everything that Laberge says in his book for mild, I mean, you're almost guaranteed a lucid dream. Like, if you're doing everything and you're doing it correctly, it's a lot of stuff to do. But I mean, it's hard for me to believe that anybody would not be able to unless there's something else going on. Hopefully that helps. There's been some more studies since this meta study. This is 2012. And there's been a lot more really cool research on lucid dreaming since then. Some of the more interesting research that I've seen recently has been using wake back to bed and mild. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a study here. Actually, let's pull up, where is the websites? Lucid dreaming studies. There we go. Copy link. Hold on, let me go back to Chrome. I don't like Edge. Okay, and then we search Daniel for Daniel Erlacher. Or maybe we should just search Erlacher. Was it Erlacher or Schradel? Dude, Erlacher has been busy. He's been busy. Okay. 2019. Wow, there's a lot of stuff here. I forget what year it was. I'm just going to go to Google Scholar. It's like, if I just do the custom range from like 2018, whoops, 2018 onward. What? Why is my numpad not working? Okay. Let's see. Appreciate all your help. Yeah, no problem. No, I actually like all the questions because I'm going to put this up on my channel, and it's going to be up there as a video under my live streams. So I'm trying to do these, like I did some before, and you know, I wanted to do like high production. It's just not happening. So I'm just going to do live streams. For mild, would you recommend I do it with an alarm or do a wake back to bed? I would recommend mild be done after a natural awakening, if possible. But let me... I'd like to... 16,000 results. What? There's no way that there's 16,400 results since 2019. Let me change this here. Okay, that's more like it. Should I rotate around when I set my alarm? First, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. Should rotate around. Should you rotate around when you set? Oh, I see. I feel bad. Okay. So, according to the research, they have the most success when you wake up after 6 hours and you stay awake for half an hour and then go back to sleep. So, you know, I think a natural awakening would be best, but an alarm is good to kind of train yourself to wake up naturally. Yeah, if anybody's waiting to ask a question, they can just put it in the chat. There's no nothing stopping anybody from putting a question in the chat. Let me see. I don't think they'd have WBTB. Oh, they do. Okay. There it is. Schradel. It was Schradel. Right. Yeah, this one's good. Okay, so this is really interesting stuff here. So, present study with 50 participants indicates that these techniques are also effective at home. The lucid dream percentage of 18% after wake back to bed nights compared to 6% after non-wake back to bed. 50% experienced at least one lucid dream during the 5-week period. Okay. Yeah, and that's an interesting line there. Future studies using longer time intervals can investigate the questions whether everyone can learn lucid dreaming if she or he puts in the effort, and how intensive induction training affect lucid dream frequency in the long run. That's super important because I think a lot of these lab studies have different results from people at home. You know, there seems to be a lot more success in the lab than at home. This makes sense. Like 5 out of 10 people experience a lucid dream, at least one, during a 5-week period. So that's just over a month. So that's what we're talking about, right? Like 3 months If you're doing these techniques every night for 3 months, you should have a lucid dream. Like, you should. It's a lot of effort, right? But you don't have to do wake back to bed. Although that does lower your chances there. And then if you do a wake back to bed, incorporate it into your sleep schedule so that you're still getting your solid 8. You still need that 8 hours, depending on your age. Like if you're like, look up the recommended amount of sleep for your age group. The longer you sleep, the more REM you're gonna have, by the way. So like, I guess that, I would assume that younger people have more REM sleep because they sleep longer. Not sure if that's true or not, but I would assume so. Since REM periods get longer and longer, the longer we sleep. I mean, Malice Gaming, this is mostly about consistency. It's mostly about just continuing to try, and you may have one lucid dream a month, but if you're wanting to do this long term, once you actually learn how to do it, like for me, for example, if I don't do any techniques at all, I'll still be lucid a few times a week. Just because, I learned it on my own when I was 6 years old. So I'm what they call a natural, right? Then I learned all the techniques, and I spent many years, a solid 10 years practicing techniques before, moving into like Tibetan dream yoga stuff. And so this stuff is like so ingrained, and I've recognized my dreams so well at this point that, the techniques have kind of broken down for me in a way where even if I did practice mild, it wouldn't be the Laberge mild. It wouldn't be anybody's mild. It's my mild, right? If I do wild, it's mine. It's not somebody else's. Like for wild, most of my wilds, I'm getting up to go pee, and then I go back to sleep. I go back to sleep on my face, and I feel like I'm sinking into my bed and I'm in a dream, And that particular feeling of sinking into your bed, that could be an anchor. But how many people use that as an anchor? Just about nobody. Right. By the way, this list of resources is in the Discord resource channel under websites. So if you ever want to just spend some time reading some studies, like this looks amazing. Like this is something I've been looking for years. I haven't actually gone through this list one by one. This is the phenomenology of oniric and visionary experiences from a Native American sample. That's incredible. I've been looking for something like this you can't find books on this stuff. Like Native Americans had just their worldview so different, and it's similar to, pre-Christian worldviews of indigenous people in Europe, or, you still have a lot of it, of this kind of view in Africa and, North America, South America. A lot of indigenous cultures still intact, still seeing the world this way. And they see dreams in a different way. It's I think, the big thing is like, Tibetan dream yoga, they're like, life is a dream, we have the song "Row, Row, Row Your Boat, Life's But a Dream." However it goes, and we kind of joke about it because, oh, a dream is not real. A dream is not real. But what is real, right? This reminds me of the Morpheus scene. It's super helpful. Awesome, Malice Gaming. So I'm trying to be doing these more often. Also, I'm going to try to start doing group workshops, and feel free to join. And then eventually I may start taking on some students one-on-one, but I'm just going to be doing group workshops for the time being, and we'll see how that goes. I'm really interested in helping people learn how to lucid dream without charging them for it. So we'll see how that goes. There's not a lot of money in lucid dream coaching unless you just like turn it into a sausage factory, which, I don't have really anything against that, but not exactly something I have time for right now. Have I created my own technique? Pretty much. I've created a bunch of my own techniques, and most of them live in my head. But some of them I've written down in the Discord. Those are mostly like combinations of Western and Eastern approaches to lucid dreaming and combining that together. Most people don't find it useful because it's like a black box. They don't understand it. It's like they can't see the purpose, the reason why. Even with mild, explaining like the most popular Western technique, people are like, why? This doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. And it's mostly because like you talk about something like intention. Like, who ever thinks about intention, right? We think about it without thinking about it. Oh yeah, you're doing the survey. Yeah. Get back to you on your streams. Cool. Yeah. And we want the OmniLucid Discord. The original intent was to have it for it to kind of be this crossroads of lucid dreaming content, to where we have people creating videos, we have people writing stories, we have people doing research, we have people teaching classes, that sort of thing. That was kind of the original intent, and so it's something that I'm trying to keep alive, and I want to keep that going. Everybody's busy and life gets in the way, but I think we have something good going and want to keep that going. I tell you what though, LG, the most important thing you can do, I think, to lucid dream is to play. And what I mean by that is just play with how you fall asleep or how you wake up. Just play with it. And what does that even mean? Like, it means like when you're going to sleep, how does it feel to be in bed with the covers on? How does it feel when the covers are off? What does the wall look like when the lights are out, when the lights are on? What do the blinds look like? What does it feel or look like when I put the covers over my head? And really like digging into the experience, really like giving that experience time to really like, to where you can totally, fully experience it, right? One of the most important aspects of lucid dreaming is something called openness to experience. And it's really, the people that are like this just play with things. Like, I wonder if this would, I wonder what happens when I do this. I wonder what happens when I do that. Just playing with it. And you could call it experimenting, but the reason why I say play is because you're not looking for any specific outcome. You're just trying things and seeing what happens. And not even like, oh, I'm expecting a certain thing to happen, but like, I just want to see what happens. And then, whatever. Like, okay, so when I learned how to lucid dream, it was spontaneous because, I used to have a lot of nightmares. I was terrified of falling asleep because I knew what was coming. I knew that every night was just, pure torture. And I didn't want to fall asleep. I was afraid of sleep. I had no help. My parents thought I was being attacked by demons, and I had no help. I'd wake up screaming, and eventually, nobody would come. Boy who cried wolf kind of thing, where you're just like screaming in the middle of the night as you're getting attacked and tortured, and nobody's there to help you, right? So really, a bummer of a situation, and so in that situation, I like to think of it as if my sister came to me in the dream, because it was a doll of hers that came to me in my dream, and that simple association produced a feeling of love in the dream that completely transformed the nightmare and triggered lucidity somehow. I don't really know how, but it was a bit of a miracle for me, because that completely changed my childhood, in that I didn't have to suffer through all those nightmares anymore. I could actually take control, and and during that time, my sister was kind of my protector, my guardian, and so it really it kind of makes sense in a psychological way, that she'd be the one to be in the dream there. So that started me out on my journey. And a lot of the stuff I do, I just lay in bed and stare at the wall. And texturing on the wall was like continents. I would see, try to find the United States or Australia or something on my wall texturing, and those shapes would turn into hypnagogic hallucinations. Hypnagogia is what happens when you're falling asleep. You start seeing things, hearing things, feeling things. And so those little things that I did, just playing around with it. I noticed when I closed my eyes, I'd see these little dots. And so I just like close my eyes and look at the dots. And it's like the old Windows screensaver, where it's just like, it looks like you're flying through the space with a bunch of stars coming at you. It looked like that. Let's see. Let's see if I can find that. There's something called phosphenes. There it is. There it is. Old school. So, I close my eyes and I see these white dots, right? And I would just see, okay, well, if I try to look at the dots, then they seem to move on their own. But if I just stare straight ahead, then the dots kind of like do their own thing, right? If I try to look at a dot, then it changes everything. But if I don't look at anything, it does its own thing. Okay, so then as a hypnagogic hallucination, like something visual, okay, I start seeing something, right? As soon as I look at it, it changes or it goes away. So then I just don't look at it, right? I just stare off into space, literally. And then the visuals will do its own thing. That's how I learned how to let hypnagogia produce itself. And then I slowly learned how to manipulate it here and there, right? As I'm falling asleep. Each little thing like this, I'd learned something. I learned something about how this works, how hypnagogia works, how dreaming works. Each little thing. And I'm just playing around, just playing with it. So in that way of having no expectations and you're not trying to control the outcome, you learn how you work personally. Whereas when you try to expect something, you're trying to apply something that somebody else experienced. Whereas if you're playing with it, you're coming up with your own experience. You're coming up with your own thing. And that, I think, is probably the most effective way to approach lucid dreaming. Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody coming, checking it out, hanging out, sticking around for a bit. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And I actually kind of love the fact that I'm signing off with this old school Microsoft screensaver on. All right, everybody.